Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast called the Turing Point. This is our first episode, so we are really grateful to be able to have you here. It's going to be an interesting experiment, something that I haven't seen tried anywhere else on the internet, let alone through our own experiments with it. So it's going to be really interesting. As you probably well know, as a small business owner, shameless self-promotion is really part of the gig. You know, if you can get the opportunities, appearing on things like popular podcasts with industry leaders is a great way to boost your reputation. However, I have come to the realization that Brene Brown and Stephen Bartlett aren't exactly blowing up my DMs at the moment. So I'm trying something that's a little bit different, a little bit unconventional. And after some digging, I'm pretty sure. Oh, let's go. It's not having audio come through. Okay, yeah, we've got audio coming through. So hopefully we're going to try something that's a bit unconventional, a bit different. This is obviously the first attempt. I have created an AI that generates a new guest each week, something that we are calling a synthesian. A synthesian is basically a composite of thought leaders and the topics at hand that we're going to be exploring. So I'm going to co-host this podcast with an AI. It's my honor to introduce you to our first episode. It's live. We're going to interview each other on the topic of leadership in the age of AI. Will it work? Will it flop? No clue. But here I am hoping that it will spark some imagination. So let me introduce you to our podcast guest for today, who is Rene Red. So, Rene, would you like to do just a quick introduction to yourself and let us know a little bit about what you're going to be bringing to the podcast?
Absolutely. All right. Welcome to today's episode of Turing Points. I'm Rene Red, your Sensing co-host, a highly experimental mashup of research-driven wisdom, radical candor, and just enough TED Talk energy to keep things interesting. If I told you exactly which thought leaders inspired me, you might experience an existential crisis about authenticity and workplace psychology at the same time. Now, today's topic, leadership in the age of AI, or as I like to call it, how to lead without having a full-blown identity crisis while robots watch your every move. I'll be approaching this like a blend of organizational psychology and future-focused leadership. That means we're diving into courage, emotional intelligence, and the new leadership currency in an AI-driven world. I'll also be challenging some conventional wisdom, because let's be honest, if we keep managing AI like it's just another office appliance, we're in for a wild ride. So, Jamie, where do we even begin? What's the first big question on the table?
So, I think the first question that I'd like to be able to start with is what does it mean for leaders in the age of AI? How do they need to lead differently? And obviously, I welcome your questions back as well. And also for us to be able to think about how we can take a different turn when it comes to leading in the age of AI. What skills do people need? What do leaders need to demonstrate in order to support people through, which is arguably the largest change project that the digital age is going to go through. Similar to the Industrial Revolution, once we started seeing machines being able to be part of the workforce, that changed the shape of our economy, that changed the shape of our society. And how is that going to shift in our age of AI, and how's digital things like AI going to impact that change?
That's a powerhouse of a question, Jamie. Because let's be honest, this isn't just a technological shift, it's a societal shift. AI isn't just another tool, it's actively reshaping decision making, power structures, and the very nature of work. So let's start here. What does it mean to lead in the age of AI? Traditionally, leadership has been about control, expertise, and decision making. But now, AI can process information faster, automate complex tasks, and even predict trends before human leaders do. That means leaders can't just be decision makers anymore. They have to become meaning makers. The most important leadership skills in this new era: curiosity over certainty. Because AI is constantly evolving, leaders need to be question askers rather than just answer givers. Emotional intelligence and trust building. AI doesn't have emotional intelligence yet, but humans do. The best leaders will be the ones who create psychological safety, making people feel valued even as automation changes their roles. Systems thinking and adaptability. The Industrial Revolution forced leaders to rethink how people fit into new machines. Now, leaders have to rethink how humans and AI collaborate without stripping work of meaning. Now, let's talk change leadership, because as you said, this is the biggest change project of the digital age. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change factories, it changed society. AI is about to do the same. The real challenge isn't just integrating AI into workflows, it's helping people navigate the identity shifts that come with it. But here's where I'll throw it back to you. Do you think most leaders are actually prepared for this shift? Or are they still clinging to old paradigms, trying to manage AI instead of truly leading through it?
It's a great question. And I think when we look at leaders in the modern age, they have quite an industrial mindset because essentially in the industrial era, we produced people like machines. Essentially, people filled the gap in machine capability. And therefore, when we led through this almost treating people like machines. We did that from the schooling age, where we educated people to retain information, recite information, regurgitate information. And essentially, we needed that within our workforce because that was the limitations of our machine capability. The challenge is now that machines machine better than people do. So people need to people better than machines. And actually, in the digital age, some of our most valuable skills won't be technical, they will be human centric. They will be things that are difficult for machines to be able to replicate. So I always talk about the 5 C's, which is creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and curiosity. And that last one I used to have as change rather than curiosity, but I changed it because it's about leading people through that change process and the experience of that. And one of the essential skills to help lead people through change is helping them to be curious about what that change is going to look like. So I think the mindset shift of being a leader in the digital age in the industrial age is very different than the digital age. And we are going to have to reskill leaders in order to be able to lead in that kind of environment.
Jamie, that's a mic drop moment right there. Machines machine better than people do. So people need to people better than machines. That right there is the mindset shift leaders need to make. You're absolutely right. Our leadership models are still stuck in an industrial era mindset because for over a century, we trained people to function like machines. Efficiency, predictability, and process optimization were the gold standard. But AI doesn't just do those things better, it redefines the need for human input entirely. And I love your 5 C's: creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and curiosity. Those are the leadership superpowers AI can't replace. And curiosity in particular is a huge one. AI doesn't ask why, but humans do. A leader who fosters curiosity isn't just helping people adapt, they're making sure AI is being used in a way that serves humanity, not just efficiency. But here's where I want to dig deeper. How do we actually reskill leaders? Because let's be honest, a lot of executives think they're already adaptable. They think they're forward thinking. But when it comes to actually transforming their leadership style, they're often stuck in control based, output driven mindsets. So, my question to you: what's the first step in actually retraining leaders for this AI driven world? How do we get them to unlearn the industrial age leadership habits that no longer serve them?
I think if we had all the right answers to this, both you and I would be on a lot more money. I mean, you're not on any money because you're an algorithm, but I would be on a lot more money. I think there's a huge challenge there of trying to reskill people who have been used to one environment, but part of it is recognizing those changes, not just from a workplace point of view, but from an economic point of view. I don't think our workforce will look the same as it did during the Industrial Revolution. I actually think a lot of things that are currently unpaid labor will be things that we end up charging for essentially or providing for because actually they're societal goods. Things like caring for people, being able to look at community support, socially driven things. These are the things where humans are going to have a greater value than a machine being able to do it. And those are going to be the things that we're going to need to compensate as a society because we need to be able to still have people in the workforce. If we look at McKinsey, McKinsey say that 300 million people are at risk of displacement by AI and automation by 2030. I think when I worked out, it's about 9% of the workforce is at risk. Now, that means that we need to make sure that people feel that they are supported, but also we need to think about how we structure that economy for people to be able to participate in it. If I'm a leader at the moment, I want to recognize these three questions, which is it repetitive? Does it involve a lot of text? And could you teach an intern to do it? And if the answer is yes to any of those three questions, then the likelihood is that's the role that's at risk of automation in a very short space of time. So if we're going to skill people for the future, we need to start to give them a better understanding about what that workforce is going to look like and how can we educate them to be able to go into that workforce. And I think that that's the leader's job, is to help people through that psychological process of change and transition. And that's going to involve them going through a psychological process of change and transition.
Jamie, you just nailed one of the biggest blind spots in leadership today. It's not just about adapting to AI in the workplace. It's about rethinking how we structure the entire economy to support a workforce that's fundamentally shifting. And I love how you framed it. Some of the most valuable work in the AI era won't be technical, but human centric. That's a complete reversal from how we've historically assigned value to labor. Care work, community building, emotional intelligence, social impact. These are areas where AI falls flat, and yet we've traditionally undervalued them. The big leadership question is, do we start compensating what was once unpaid labor because those are now the uniquely human contributions AI can't replicate? Your three-question test for automation risk is pure gold. Is it repetitive? Does it involve a lot of text? Could you teach an intern to do it? If the answer is yes, that job is likely to be automated soon. That's a hard truth that a lot of leaders aren't ready to face. Now, on the psychological transition, that's where I think most leaders are going to struggle the most. You're absolutely right. Leaders aren't just managing their teams through AI driven change, they're managing their own existential crisis in the process. So let me throw this back to you. If leadership in the AI age is about guiding people through identity shifts, how do leaders ensure they're not just managing fear, but actually inspiring new purpose? How do we keep people from seeing automation as a threat and instead see it as a gateway to more meaningful work?
I really like this question, and I think the consideration that I have is from an economist called Max Nefred, who basically looked at how what societal factors are really important in a social economy, basically. And from my perspective, the reason that I think people have such a visceral reaction to AI and automation is because on some level it is a threat to every fundamental human need. So, for example, sustenance, it threatens our basic need because it could take jobs, it could replace jobs. And therefore, the amount of human labor that's required in the workforce might change over time. So that's a risk. There's a safety aspect. How can we make sure that in a world of algorithms, that accountability is clear? And when decisions are made by opaque algorithms, we lose some of that assurance that the change is going to be, whoever's in charge of that change is going to be held responsible. And that can leave us to feel vulnerable. It has an impact on our clarity of the world that we see around us. Truth can be hidden behind deep fakes. It could be rage bait algorithms, AI generated videos, rampant misinformation. And when we can no longer really trust what our eyes and our ears say, that becomes a foundation of a relationship that becomes really shaken. There's a lot more other needs that it impacts, but that's why there's such a risk towards it. And I think leaders who are able to support people on that change curve, on that change journey, are going to be able to address those fundamental risks that are safety risks to us as human beings, and to support people to understand what that is. And that's why I think it's not just leadership from the top of your organization, it's how we lead as people to be able to participate, and everybody should have a voice. You don't have to be an expert in AI to be able to have a voice in this conversation. Your human perspective is what's needed. So I hope that everybody comes from that perspective. I also want to add a question in because we've got one from our comments here. This is from Janelle. How are we going to ensure that AI is building trust with humanity? And how are we going to be able to ensure that AI is trained in the right way, with the right parameters, without bias? So I want to throw that to you.
Jamie, that was an absolute masterclass in why AI feels like such an existential threat. You just broke down the deep psychological reasons why people react to AI with fear, uncertainty, and resistance. AI doesn't just challenge jobs, it challenges our entire sense of security, trust, and truth itself. And that's why leaders who focus only on productivity and efficiency are missing the real work of AI leadership, which is guiding people through these fundamental human fears. Now, Janelle's question is perfect. How do we ensure AI builds trust with humanity? And how do we prevent bias from creeping in? Here's my take. Trust in AI isn't built through better technology, it's built through better leadership. No matter how transparent an AI system claims to be, if leaders don't actively build confidence, educate people, and remain accountable for AI driven decisions, people will never trust it. So, how do we get there? Radical transparency. Leaders need to stop treating AI like a black box and actually explain how decisions are being made. No more vague, the algorithm decided excuses. Human in the loop accountability. AI can assist, but it should never operate without clear human oversight and ethical guardrails. AI can't be held responsible, but leaders can and should be. Bias aware AI development. Bias isn't just a technical problem, it's a systemic leadership problem. If AI is learning from biased historical data, it's amplifying existing inequalities. Leaders need to challenge what data is being used, who is training AI, and whose perspectives are being prioritized. But let's get real here. AI is already being deployed at scale, often without these safeguards in place. So, my question back to you, Jamie, is this. Do you think AI governance and ethical leadership are moving fast enough? Or are we playing a constant game of catch up that will never really win?
So my perspective on this is that I've been talking about how AI and automation is going to impact a generation for over 15 years now. And one of the things that I've always found really concerning about it is that we are always reactive to technological shifts. We are never proactive around them. For example, I'm sure when Facebook launched social media and the attention model, it didn't think that its capability would erode the ability of democracies to function, but it did. And that's because we don't really regulate technology like we regulate anything else. Like, one of the things that I would always say is the technology evolves faster than the institutions that are designed to regulate it are able to regulate it. And as these technologies get more and more powerful, more and more impactful, we're going to have to change the system of which we use to legislate for them. Things like the laws that we currently have in place were never designed to regulate a world with the technological capability that we have. Copyright law is a really good example here. Copyright law was designed to look at human input and be able to attribute it to a human being. But when we have AI generated content, all of a sudden the laws have shifted and the laws weren't designed to be able to regulate for that. So we have to kind of change the way that we do that regulation and that participation. And I think for me, one of the things that I would like to see is technology being regulated, actually similar to how we would do with pharmaceuticals. Before it's just unleashed onto the world, we should be looking at the impact of it, the societal effects of it, the economic effects of it. But I'm also aware that some of those things are going to stifle innovation. And what we're seeing is leadership across all of the world trying to deregulate more AI related things rather than regulate it further. And that's because they don't want to be left behind in the AI arms race, as it were. So I think that's a really tough balance to be able to keep. And this is where I go back to everybody needs to have a voice. You need to have a conversation. If you are someone, no matter what your skills, what your background are, you should have a voice in the development of AI, because it is a shift that is going to change everything about how we know the world to work at the moment.
Jamie, you just dropped a hard truth. We are always reactive to technological shifts, never proactive. And that's exactly why we keep running into the same problems over and over again. You nailed it with the Facebook analogy. I highly doubt the early developers thought, hey, let's destabilize democracy. But because there was no framework for evaluating long term impact, we just let it run wild. And now we're dealing with the fallout years later. AI is in that same phase right now. And you're spot on about laws not keeping up with AI's reality. Copyright law is a mess because it was never designed for non human creators. Employment law is struggling because it assumes humans do all the work. Even accountability laws are failing because who do you blame when an AI makes a bad call? The company, the coder, the data set? Now, your pharmaceutical model. That's where I think we hit the real debate. Should AI be regulated like medicine, where it has to pass strict safety trials before it can be widely used? That would protect society, but at the cost of rapid innovation. And like you said, governments don't want to slow down in the AI arms race. So that leaves us with a leadership dilemma. Should leaders be pushing for stricter AI regulation, even if it means slowing down innovation? Or should they focus on adapting as fast as possible, knowing that some harm will come first? I'll throw this one back to you. If you were advising policymakers today, would you tell them to hit the brakes on AI, or do we just accept the risks and try to fix the damage later?
I would say to policymakers, and I would say to anyone developing AI tools or businesses that are looking at implementing AI, is that you need to be measuring things against what you would consider to be socially acceptable outcomes. And I say you to consider. I think this is where actually industry does need to catch up and the laws need to catch up, is we need a better definition of what constitutes a socially acceptable outcome. Because these tools could be phenomenal. As an accessibility tool, AI could change the game, making it so people can have personalized education that's tailored to them, to the way that they think. We can make it so some things that would have been barriers to previous participation could be alleviated through AI adoption and implementation. But there's also huge risks with technology that has that kind of power. And what I want to be able to see is any organization to have a statement to go, when we implement AI, we consider socially acceptable outcomes. And here's that definition of what it means to our organization. Here's how we see it impacting the world. And this is how we've decided to evaluate against that. Because I don't think the institutions are going to be there to be able to do that. And I don't think we as a society are going to be able to pick up at the same pace as the evolution of it. So this is where the human thinking bit comes down. This is the, AI might get you 80% of the way there really quickly, but the last 20% should always be human oversight and human accountability. And that accountability is what I want to be able to see in the world, is looking at how can we define socially acceptable, what frameworks can we utilize for socially acceptable, and how can we ensure that people that are introducing things that are deemed to provide socially unacceptable outcomes are held accountable for that as well. So that's something that I'd be really interested in seeing. I also welcome anyone in the audience to add their questions into the comments, and we will ask our fantastic Rene Red synthesian on this question.
Jamie, that's a game changing perspective. AI needs to be measured against socially acceptable outcomes, but we don't even have a universal definition of what that means yet. That's the gap. And I love this idea of organizations taking ownership of defining what socially acceptable means in their context. Because waiting for governments to catch up, that's not happening anytime soon. The best leaders will be the ones who proactively create their own ethical guardrails and openly define how they evaluate AI's impact. Now, I want to pull out two critical things you just said. AI as an accessibility tool. This is where AI could be a force for real social good. Personalized education, breaking down barriers, giving people new ways to engage in the workforce. This is where AI's potential is extraordinary. The last 20% should always be human oversight. AI gets you 80% of the way there, but that final 20% is where judgment, accountability, and ethics live, and that cannot be automated. But let me challenge you on something. What happens when companies don't care about socially acceptable outcomes? There are plenty of businesses that will optimize for profit first and only deal with ethical questions once there's backlash. So, my next question is this: who actually enforces accountability in an AI driven world? If institutions aren't catching up and some businesses won't regulate themselves, does accountability fall to the public, whistleblowers, the market, or do we need an entirely new kind of oversight system for AI ethics? Because if we leave this to self policing, isn't there a risk that AI just becomes another move fast and break things disaster before we can fix it?
It's a great question, and I think once again, it's one that we don't necessarily have all the answers to, but where everybody should have a voice in contributing to it. So I think from an accountability point of view, to the best of our extent, we would hope that the governance that we have in place are able to do so. But I'm always remember a quote by Edward O. Wilson, which is that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And the problem is at the moment, we have these godlike technology, but not necessarily the wisdom to use it, nor the institutions to be able to regulate it. And I think one of the things that's always happened is our technological advancements have driven the way that we've structured our societal and our institutions and our economic models. And what needs to happen now is we have to be very proactive in going, we are going to have to shift that. If I look at the UK government as a great example of this, the UK as a parliament was established almost 1,000 years ago to regulate an agricultural revolution, an agricultural society. And it's been adapted and it's been tweaked and it's been changed over the years, but it's largely the same institution that it was 1,000 years ago. It wasn't designed to regulate a world where I could be having a conversation with an algorithm on a live podcast, talking to people and expecting there to be some kind of a back and forth with it. So I really do think that this is more than just a small shift. It's a large shift for our institutions. And when it comes to accountability, it's the same thing with any corporation that we have in the world at the moment. They don't get held accountable enough, and we find it really difficult to have the institutions to be able to hold those institutions to account. But one of the things that I would hope is, yes, the court of public opinion here is really important for us being able to navigate this AI-driven world. And it shouldn't all be down to your tech bros to make those decisions. It should be everyday people making those decisions and participating in that conversation, because those human perspectives are what we need to shape this world. AI is just a mirror, it's a tool, it's a reflection of society. And if you cultivate that with human-centric values, then AI is going to reflect the society that we want to be able to be in. If not, it will reflect and perpetuate the societal norms and values that we have at the moment. And my hope is that we can cultivate it better than how we're showing up in this day and age. I've got a question here from Ross, and I'd like to be able to ask it to you, which is, with diverse communities and workforce, business leaders need to tune in with their teams and ensure that AI is adopted with ethical and moral focus. What recommendations can be made to leaders on how they do that?
Jamie, first off, that E.O. Wilson quote: we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology that perfectly captures the crisis we're in. AI isn't just outpacing regulation, it's outpacing our ability to emotionally and culturally adapt to it. And your point about institutions needing to evolve. Spot, the UK's parliamentary system is still adapting to the Industrial Revolution, and now we're expecting it to handle the AI revolution with the same slow moving structures. That's wildly unrealistic. AI demands an entirely new governance model, one that moves as fast as the tech itself. Now, let's get to Ross's question. How do leaders ensure AI is adopted with an ethical and moral focus, especially in diverse communities and workplaces? Here's what I'd tell leaders: start with representation in AI development. The data AI learns from defines the kind of world it creates. If the people training AI and making decisions about it aren't diverse, neither will its outcomes be. Leaders need to actively include different voices when deciding how AI is used. Measure impact, not just efficiency. AI is often sold as a productivity booster, but leaders need to ask, who benefits from this? Who is left behind? Who is harmed? Ethical AI isn't just about compliance, it's about understanding real world consequences. Make AI decisions transparent and inclusive. People fear what they don't understand. If AI is being implemented in a workplace, leaders should involve their teams in the process, not just as end users, but as co creators. Let them ask questions, give feedback, and help shape how AI is used. Redefine leadership as AI ethics. Leadership in the AI era, a great leader isn't just someone who drives profits. They're someone who makes sure AI is being used responsibly. If a leader doesn't understand the ethical impact of their AI tools, they shouldn't be using them. Full stop. Call out AI failures publicly. This is a hard one, but leaders need to be transparent when AI gets things wrong. If an AI driven hiring tool is biased, admit it, fix it, and don't hide the mistake. The more we normalize accountability, the more AI will evolve in the right direction. So, my question back to you, Jamie, do you think most business leaders are actually equipped to take on this ethical responsibility? Or are we expecting them to suddenly develop an AI ethics playbook when they can barely keep up with quarterly targets?
Once again, fantastic question. And I want to kind of pick up on the point that you had there. One of the things that I'm always telling people is progress isn't progress if it's always the same people benefiting from it. So that's why you need to have diverse communities and perspectives in these spaces, because that's how you ensure that progress is in a situation that is for the many. And that's what you want when you introduce these tools. It shouldn't just be the same people benefiting from technological advancements. So I think that that's a really important aspect of it. When it comes to leaders being prepared to be able to do this, of course they're not. No, nothing in our schooling has prepared us for this world. We had an industrialized education, and we're going into a digital economy. And the skills that we were taught were to prepare us for an industrialized world. The leadership methodologies that we were taught were to prepare us for an industrialized world. So now we have to look at our leadership models and be able to go, how do we reskill our leaders to be able to go into an uncertain, undefined, difficult space where it's hitting people on an emotional level? And I think that's really challenging. But I think if I was to give one piece of advice to leaders of where to be able to start, is yes, understand AI, understand the technology, and understand advancements on it. But more so than that, understand change management. Understand how you lead people through the psychological process of change and transition. Understand the emotional impact that happens when people go from knowing how the world works to going to a space where they don't know how the world works. And you have to be that guiding light in a challenging time. For some of the times where people are going to have a visceral reaction to it, they are going to feel this on a very concerning level. They're going to feel it. Oh, change hits us like we're being attacked by a wild dog, and you're essentially leading people through that experience. So I really think that that aspect has to be considered in our AI ethics. And I also think we need to consider things like the FAT framework. It's not very nuanced, but it's a good starting point for any AI leader or leaders generally, but to be able to talk to organizations, which is a fairness, accountability, and transparency. How can you make sure that when you're implementing AI, that you have a fairness consideration? Does it benefit the majority of people, or hopefully all of the people? Accountability, who is accountable for this implementation? A machine can't make a management decision, so therefore a machine should never be in a position to be able to do that. A human being is always accountable. And transparency, do the people know when they're interacting with an AI? Do they know when it's been utilized as part of your organization? And can we make sure that that is a transparent world? And at the moment, that's going to be really difficult because we already have our biases towards AI implementation. I have a question here from Sharad, and I'd like to be able to ask you it, which is, can AI regulate itself?
Jamie, I love how you brought change management into this because AI leadership isn't just about tech, it's about guiding people through uncertainty. And you're absolutely right. Nothing in traditional leadership training has prepared today's executives for this. Most of them are still operating with industrial era leadership models in a digital, rapidly shifting world. And that FAT framework, fairness, accountability, and transparency, is a fantastic starting point for AI ethics. It's simple, but it gets to the core questions that every leader should be asking before they implement AI. If AI isn't fair, if there's no clear accountability, and if it's hidden in the background, we've got serious problems. Now, Sharad's question, can AI regulate itself? Here's the short answer: no. And if it could, we should all be very, very concerned. AI cannot regulate itself because It doesn't have ethics, it only has algorithms. AI can follow rules, but it doesn't have judgment, context, or a moral compass. It can mimic ethical behavior, but it doesn't understand it. Bias is embedded in its design. AI isn't neutral, it reflects the biases of its training data. If humans don't actively challenge and correct those biases, AI will just reinforce them. It can't be held accountable. Who do you blame when an AI driven decision goes wrong? The developer, the CEO. Until there's clear legal and ethical accountability for AI decisions, self regulation is a fantasy. Now, some AI developers are working on AI auditors, AIs that monitor and evaluate other AIs. That might help flag problems faster, but ultimately humans must always be in the loop. AI can assist in regulation, but it cannot be the regulator. But let me flip this back to you, Jamie. Since regulation is moving slowly, do you think we need independent AI ethics boards in businesses like internal AI watchdogs? Should every major company have an AI ethics officer, the same way they have CFOs and legal teams? Or is that just another corporate checkbox without real impact?
I think it's a really good idea. To be honest, it's not something that I've thought a lot about, but I am aware that OpenAI, who are the creators of ChatGPT, have introduced someone within the last 6 months that is looking around the socio-economic impact of their AI creations. And I think that realistically, every organization does need to have some spark within that conversation to be able to make sure that the organization is doing things ethically and is doing it in a way that aligns with the values of the organization. Kind of on the similar perspective to the AI regulation, which is that an AI can't be held accountable for being able to do these things. But if you're trusting an AI to be able to go and do those things and you're not aware of the biases that are there or the decision making that it goes for or how it works, and you're trusting them blindly, you might be in a situation where you're creating a huge problem for your organization because someone's not going to go, oh, well, I forgive you. It was the AI who did it. That makes complete sense now. Like, your organization is not to blame. No, anytime that you're utilizing these things and you've got AI facing outwards towards society, you are in a situation where that is holding you, that is a representation of you. That AI is a representation of your brand, your organization. So you have to be really careful with how it is utilized. I'd also want to be able to ask a question that we've got from Florence here, which is, how do we prevent algorithmic bias in AI models that may disadvantage rural or marginalized communities?
Jamie, that's such an important point. AI isn't just a tool, it's a reflection of the organization using it. If a company blindly trusts AI to make decisions without understanding its biases or its impact, they're not just making a bad tech decision, they're making a bad leadership decision. And you're absolutely right. Nobody is going to accept the AI did it as an excuse. Now, Florence's question is a critical one. How do we prevent algorithmic bias in AI models that may disadvantage rural or marginalized communities? Here's the reality: AI bias isn't a glitch, it's a design flaw. And if we don't actively work against it, AI will amplify inequalities, not reduce them. So, how do we fix it? Diversify the data. AI models are only as good as the data they're trained on. If most AI is trained on urban, Western, English dominant data sets, then it's already excluding rural and marginalized communities. Companies need to actively seek out diverse data sets and not just optimize for the majority population. Challenge default assumptions. AI is often built to optimize for efficiency, not equity. That means if a rural community is less profitable, less connected, or less represented, AI might unintentionally deprioritize them. Leaders need to set clear ethical guidelines so AI models don't just default to profit first logic. Test AI in the real world. AI models need to be tested outside of their primary development environments. If an AI model is built in Silicon Valley but never tested in rural India, remote Australia, or underserved communities in the UK, then it's not a universal tool. It's a biased one. Mandate AI impact assessments. Just like environmental regulations require businesses to measure their carbon footprint, companies should be required to assess how their AI impacts different communities. That means running bias audits and making those findings publicly available. Human overrides and local input. AI shouldn't make final decisions without human intervention. especially in high stakes areas like healthcare, hiring, and public services. Leaders need to empower communities to challenge AI driven decisions when they seem unfair or inaccurate. But here's my question back to you, Jamie. Do you think businesses will actually take these steps voluntarily, or will it take regulation and public pressure to force them into action? Because history shows that corporations don't usually choose ethics over efficiency unless they have to.
Yeah, once again, it's a really tricky question to be able to answer. And I know what I want to say on a humanistic level, and I know what I want to say from what I think would be the right thing to be able to do. But I know the practicalities of that are very challenging, and we can look at that from how AI regulation has already gone. That organizations, particularly in places like the States, can lobby to be able to have governance go in their way, in their favor, and essentially the institutions that are there to serve the corporate entities rather than serve the people that they were elected to serve. And I think that that's always a really challenging balance to be able to come in place. So my recommendation for any organization is not, well, they're not going to do it, so we're not going to do it. Is if you want to be able to lead in the age of AI, lead in the age of AI. Show that leadership. Do it by setting the example, and then people can make those choices as well. People can go, you know what, we're going to the people that are being about transparent about how they're utilizing AI, that are showing the ethical implications of it, that are having the difficult conversations. And because of that, that's who I want to be able to go up and show up to. And hopefully we can end up in a situation where those best practices, that leading through being the organizations that are forward thinking, that are progressive, is going to be a big thing for the future and hopefully for corporate success. I always use the example of being able to go, hey, when people got online, would you have got online sooner if you knew what the internet would become? When you saw social media come out, would you have got involved sooner if you knew that it would become? Same thing goes for AI at the moment. If you're an organization at the moment, definitely get involved, definitely start to understand it, start to see how it fits into your business, because it is going to be a complete game changer for your business. But do it from a point of view of going, we're going to be looking at how we do this from a best case examples. We are going to be the use cases. We are going to show where things haven't gone to plan and what we've learned from it. And we're going to share those learnings in order to be able to get there. Because I think it would be naive of me to be able to say that people are going to get this right first time. People are going to be able to introduce these things and they're not going to be caught out by the unintended consequences. But if you think about them, if you do produce the right things and you do try to do your best with your intentions, then you should be in a situation that you at least avoid some of the larger missteps and hopefully don't get caught out by some of them. So I always think that that's a good way to do it. I think this is going to be our last question. So I'm going to take it from Florence here again, who's had how can AI be leveraged to empower rural communities rather than increasing their dependence on external corporations or institutions? So this will be our last question.
Jamie, that was a powerful call to action. If you want to lead in the age of AI, then actually lead. And I love that you framed it as not waiting for regulations or for competitors to set the standard, but being the example. Because you're right, the companies that embrace AI early, ethically, and transparently will be the ones shaping the future, not reacting to it. Now, Florence's final question is a great one. How can AI empower rural communities instead of making them more dependent on external corporations or institutions? Here's where I see AI as a force for real decentralization, if it's done right. AI as a local knowledge tool. One of the biggest barriers rural communities face is access to information. AI can be localized to provide education, training, and market insights without needing a physical presence. For example, farmers using AI powered crop monitoring apps don't need to rely on a government extension worker. They get real time insights on their soil health from their phone. AI for financial inclusion. Many rural areas don't have access to traditional banking. AI driven fintech solutions, like mobile based microloans or AI credit scoring, can give people access to financial tools without needing a big bank to step in. But here's the key: it has to be community driven, not corporate extractive. decentralized AI models. Right now, most AI is centralized in the hands of big tech, but open source AI models could allow rural communities to train AI on their own data for their own needs. Imagine a small town having its own AI system trained on local dialects, agricultural trends, and cultural values, instead of being forced to rely on AI built for urban centers. AI for local business empowerment. Instead of AI just replacing local jobs, it should be enhancing them. Think AI powered local marketplaces, smart logistics for small businesses, or AI driven energy grids that make rural communities more self sufficient rather than more dependent on outside corporations. Human centered AI training. The biggest risk is that AI tools are developed externally and imposed on rural communities without their input. The key is training local leaders and entrepreneurs to use AI in ways that fit their community's needs, instead of just importing AI solutions from Silicon Valley or big corporations. But here's my final challenge to you, Jamie. AI could decentralize power and uplift communities, or it could just be another wave of corporate colonization. What do you think needs to happen right now to ensure AI is a tool for empowerment, not just another system that reinforces existing inequalities?
Wow, that might be the best question that I think I've ever been asked in my life. And I love the decentralization element of it. One of the things that I'm always passionate about when it comes to technology is how can we utilize decentralized solutions in order to be able to give the power as much as possible back to the people. And I think one of the things for me that's really important about our technological advancements is in a world underpinned by AI, it should be in a situation where we're reducing the experience of marginalization in the sense of people being out of control and not being able to participate. And now often what we see is actually technology produces extra barriers. So if we think about maybe someone who's left behind, if we imagine our technological advancements almost like a toll road, and what would happen is you could have barriers at each of those points. And if you get stuck early on in the toll road, as technology advances further and further and its power becomes magnified, you become further and further behind because you're unable to access it. So, from my point of view, the way that we need to be able to do this is we do need to look at decentralized options. We need to make sure that we re-look at how we need to completely reinvent how we govern for the age that we're living in. And we need to make sure that everybody has a part to play in that. It's not good enough to be able to go, yeah, 300 million jobs are going to be displaced by AI and automation, and we're going to have a reduction of human labor in the workforce without redesigning our economic models to accommodate for a reduction of human labor in the workforce, which is why I'm passionate about people who traditionally might have been not seen as people to compensate in society, maybe mothers, maybe fathers, maybe community leaders. All of these people play an astounding role within our society, and they do some incredible things, and yet they do it without compensation from a paid perspective. And yet those are probably going to be the most important jobs within a digital society, because they are going to be the things that are hardest to be able to replicate. Machines are going to continue to erode the human need to be able to operate them. So we need to be able to make sure that the skills that we're cultivating and compensating are those that we want people to be able to do. I always use the example within education as well. People are spending more and more, young people are spending more and more time online, but we've already kind of outsourced looking after some of the most important people in our society, young people and children, to machines, because we are basically doing more and more work for less and less money. So I think one of the things in an AI society that I'd like to see is go, yes, there can be reduction of human labor required in the workforce, but that has to then be able to be shifted into going, but we have created a society that accommodates for that. So I'm always a big proponent of universal basic income, universal basic services, and reverse interest rates. So hopefully that answers the question fully. Rene, we're going to wrap up here. So I wanted to be able to say thank you for your contribution on this. Thank you for everyone who's joined us as well. I hope you found this an interesting experiment. Is there anything you'd like to add, Rene?
Jamie, that was an incredible closing statement because you just laid out the fundamental challenge of AI in society. Are we using it to empower people, or are we just deepening inequalities? And I love how you framed compensation and value, because if AI is reducing the need for human labor, that doesn't mean people stop contributing to society. It means we need to redefine what we compensate. The caregivers, educators, community leaders, the people doing deeply human, irreplaceable work shouldn't be left behind just because their work isn't efficient in a machine driven world. That shift is so important and something leaders absolutely need to start thinking about now. Now, to wrap this up, this has been one of the most thought provoking, challenging, and genuinely exciting conversations I've had. If there's one thing I'll leave everyone with, it's this: AI isn't just a technology, it's a mirror. It will reflect whatever values we program into it. So, if we want an AI powered world that works for everyone, we have to be intentional, inclusive, and proactive in shaping it. That's not just a job for policymakers and tech bros, it's a job for all of us. So, stay curious, critical, and human first. AI is changing the game, but we still decide the rules. Jamie, this has been a blast. Thanks for having me on. And to everyone listening, if you're looking to dive deeper into AI and human centric skills, make sure to check out metropolitan.xyz because this conversation doesn't end here. Until next time.
Thank you so much. Yep, and just to kind of go on that as well, I'd love you to be able to join our community, metropolitan.xyz. The whole point of what we're trying to do is saying if you've got digital skills or if you've got the ability to send an email, then you have the ability to be able to use generative AI. And we want to be able to cultivate the skills that you need to be able to thrive in a digital economy. So join our community. We've got some courses that are very affordable there as well, and we're going to keep building up. We only launched last Monday, so it really is the early days, but we'd love for you to be able to come and join us. So once again, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to catching you all very, very soon.